I, 31, have been married to Ben, 33, for 3.5 years. We met in high school and reconnected several years later. Once we started dating, there was no looking back. And here we are married for 3 years and still going strong. Not everyone was happy about our wedding though, especially my older sister Sasha, 33. We went to the same high school, and Sasha had a major crush on my husband back then. It turned out Sasha had feelings for him, but he didn't know about it until a few months into our relationship. She didn't come to our wedding and hasn't talked to me since I got engaged, which was okay because she never seemed to like me, and I didn't understand why. Our sibling relationship wasn't the usual golden child versus sideline sibling scenario. Our parents treated us equally, and there wasn't a gap in academics or sports. We're practically identical, so I never got why she disliked me so much. I tried to be friends, but it always got rejected. So I just stopped and made my peace with the fact that my older sister just didn't like me. And that was that we were close. So her not attending my wedding didn't make much of a difference to me at all. We only met on holidays or family events, but even then she doesn't acknowledge me, and neither do I. It might be worth having a chat because trying to befriend someone who dislikes you for no reason is futile. Our relatives know about our distant relationship, so it's become an accepted norm. But around 6 months back, she crossed paths with me, and it was pretty pathetic. 6 months back, my husband received a drunken phone call from Sasha where she went on to speak at length about how he'd married the wrong sister, and that she would be a much better wife for him than I was. She didn't know she was on the speaker, and I was sitting right beside him, giggling through her rant. She eventually ended it by announcing that she was going to marry him one way or the other, and she'd even be willing to be his mistress if it came down to it. I was really surprised by that because it was so low. I'm going to be honest, I did think it was funny and pathetic, but I was also angry that she'd even dare to pull something like this, even though I hadn't even done anything to her. So I decided I'd had enough, and if she was allowed to mess with me, then so was I. I suggested to my husband that he should flirt with her and give her false hopes. It was a bit cruel, but it felt necessary and deserving. He invited her over to our house to get married, and she agreed, sounding thrilled. The next day, Ben and I set up a hidden camera in our living room, and I personally decorated our room to make it look like a dreamy wedding venue. Then I sat in the next room when she arrived and watched the drama unfold. It was way too funny to watch her try and flirt with my husband while he just tried to be as stiff as possible. And after a quick exchange of vows and rings, he told her to go away and keep this a secret until he told her that it was safe to tell people. He didn't even kiss her after the vows, and even then, the idiot didn't seem to think that something was off. After the mock ceremony, Ben and I ended up laughing at the video for around half an hour because of how delusional this woman seemed. It was just sad that she was ready to go so low just because she hated me and wanted my husband. Sucks for her that my husband doesn't love anyone other than me. We thought we'd send the video to my parents, but decided that we'd wait for the right time. She would definitely try to pull some crap on us again, and that's when we'd send this to them so that they realized what a trashy person she really is, who was willing to hit on someone else's husband just to get back at her sister. My parents treated us equally, but they were also way too supportive of Sasha, even though she didn't deserve that. For instance, they paid for Sasha's vacation to Spain a few months before I was supposed to get married, because apparently she was very affected by this wedding and wanted some time away. I hated that they were falling for her victim act, but they were also paying for my wedding venue, so I couldn't complain that they were being unfair. They didn't seem to see Sasha's faults, and it bothered me. They allowed her to stay at their place when I was away on my honeymoon because she claimed to feel lonely. It frustrated me that she used my marriage and her crush as a way to get sympathy from our parents, and they kept believing her. I wanted to show them that she wasn't as nice as they thought and that they didn't need to feel sorry for her all the time. So for that, if I had to do something sly and backhanded, then I was ready to do that as well. I just didn't want my parents falling for Sasha's act anymore. We had to wait for the right time to send it to my parents though, because I knew that if I told them we pulled this off just because of a drunk phone call, they'd tell me that I was being just as bad as her and it would lead nowhere. So I had to wait for her to mess up somehow. A few days back, Sasha finally publicly announced that she's been married to Ben for half a year now. And even though they've been keeping it under wraps up until now, she's finally ready to own up to it. She also added that she was giving me 1 day to vacate the house and hand over all my jewelry, since now, as Ben's wife, she owned everything that once used to be mine. Ben and I were at home that day when our inbox and phones started blowing up. Relatives were bombarding us with messages and calls, asking what the commotion was all about. After their staged wedding, Sasha kept sending texts to Ben, expressing her love, and relentlessly asking when they were going to share their supposed love story with everyone. Ben would probably reply once a month and would always tell her that they'd do it when the time was right. The last time she texted was 3 weeks ago, and I guess she just couldn't wait anymore. I was surprised that she'd actually gone ahead and done something so crazy, but well, I knew this was bound to happen someday. She was always going to snap and do something insanely stupid and ridiculous. And this was it. Ben decided to call her up and even recorded the call so that I'd have more proof to show to my parents. Even on the phone call, she was pretty confident, in spite of the fact that Ben had he handed over his phone to me. For whatever reason, she genuinely believed that she and Ben were still actually married. She told me that begging her, pleading with her wasn't going to change the reality, so I could just save my breath and instead use my energy to think about what I would do now. So I didn't have anything. It was so ridiculous that I actually ended up laughing in her face before I told her the truth about what had happened 6 months ago. When I confronted Sasha and explained the truth, she flat out refused to believe me and insisted on speaking to her supposed husband. I handed Ben his phone, and it took him a good 10 minutes to convince Sasha of the reality. I found it puzzling that she had fallen for our ruse, considering there was no actual priest conducting the wedding, no official paperwork, and even her alleged husband wasn't willing to talk to her more than once a month. I think anyone with even half a brain cell would have realized that this was all fake, and she'd been screwed over if there was so many hints. But she's too delusional. Once she did realize though, she totally snapped and started screaming at us about how we just ruined her reputation in life, and that we were downright evil and immoral for doing this to her. She was even sobbing about how I destroyed her life. But I really think that it was she who did this to herself. She wanted my husband and my life so badly that she was willing to do anything for it. I really don't understand how that's my fault. Even after that, when I sent my parents the wedding video and explained to them everything that had happened since, they'd been getting a lot of calls regarding Sasha's post, and since they weren't too active on social media, they had no idea what was going on. Ben and I decided to come clean to our parents, hoping they would understand Sasha's deceitful intentions and see how she was trying to disrupt our lives just to be with Ben and take over my life. But instead, the only thing my parents focused on was our actions. They saw it as a cruel prank, failing to see Sasha's true intentions and the threat she posed to our family. They disregarded Sasha's actions entirely, solely criticizing our decision to prank her. They told me that they were truly embarrassed by the antics that their fully grown daughters were up to, and even threatened to cut us both out of their will if we didn't grow the hell up and issue a public apology to each other. I got into an argument with my parents over this because they just couldn't make me apologize to the woman who was trying to steal my husband from me. It was just not fair. And yes, maybe I've been a bit too cruel and had taken things too far, but that didn't just magically make Sasha's actions right. My parents are just stuck on the fact that what we did to Sasha was messed up on the psychological level, and instead of creating so much drama, we could have just blocked her after that phone call and made sure that we told them that day itself. My parents felt we shouldn't have waited so long, foreseeing that Sasha would eventually cause trouble for the family. They believe both Ben and I need to reflect on our actions. My mom acknowledged Sasha's disruptive behavior, but criticized me, saying what I did was psychotic, implying that I'm no better than Sasha, just a different kind of problem. And she couldn't believe that she'd raised 2 daughters who hated each other so much that they were willing to stoop to any level just for revenge, even at our age. I'll admit that it really did sting a lot. It's been 2 whole days and I still can't bring myself to forget that comment. Even though Ben thinks that my parents were way too harsh on us, I don't know what to think right now. I defer making a fool out of my sister for 6 months by making her believe that my husband actually loved her back. Update 1. Hi guys, I know I messed up. I do realize that now, so everyone can ease up on the hatred. I'm a human being and I made a huge mistake. I get that now. What I did was cruel and unnecessary just to force my parents to cut my sister off. I didn't realize it back when I was writing that post, but I guess I'd grown to hate her just as much as she hated me and didn't even realize it. Nothing justifies what I did since it caused someone an unbearable amount of shame and trauma. A few days after the whole fiasco, my parents got in touch with me and told me a lot of things that I didn't know about my sister, and I just didn't know what to say anymore. I'm ashamed of myself right now, and I wish I could go back in time to fix things. We should have just blocked her number that day and let it go. Sasha is actually in rehab right now because while I wasn't aware of it, she had a crippling alcohol addiction and was struggling with that all along. I don't blame myself for the addiction, of course, but I do think that she relapsed because of what I'd done 6 months ago. She'd relapsed once, but my parents had managed to keep an eye on her for the next few months so that she wouldn't give in once more. However, following Ben and my disclosure, she fell back into old habits once more. Those supposed vacations my parents supposedly funded for her, which I wrongly perceived, were actually stints in rehab. To excuse her absence at specific gatherings and celebrations, my parents would cite these vacations as the reason. Sasha and I had lost touch after she left for college, so I had no means of understanding her struggles during that time. My parents told me that they do think they messed up by not telling me the real reason she'd be absent for so long and didn't realize that their lies about where she was would backfire in such a way. They hadn't even considered the possibility that maybe even I'd feel jealous and tried to get back at her. Which is why this whole situation came to be in the first place. I really just don't understand what to do right now and feel so awfully guilty. Sasha had behavioral problems all along growing up, but I've never known that because my parents had never told me about any of that. They'd done their best to treat us like equals, and I think they did their job well too. But this was just a consequence of keeping us separate that they hadn't considered, and neither had we, to be very honest. Both of us had lost any compassion we had for each other and had forgotten that this person we hated so much was also a human being. I really do regret whatever happened, and I'm planning on paying her a visit as soon as I can so that I can at least apologize for whatever happened. There are still a lot of our relatives and extended family who are trying to gossip about what has happened. And while under usual circumstances, I would have grabbed this opportunity to talk crap about Sasha, I'm obviously ignoring all those people now and only praying that nothing too serious happens to her. Since my parents told me that they'd found her passed out in her house, which was a first, all the other times that she's relapsed, she's been able to approach them and ask for help, still conscious. When my parents didn't hear from her for 2 days after that post, they decided to go visit her, and that's when they realized that she'd relapsed yet again. I can't imagine how difficult it must have been for my parents to realize that my sister Sasha and I had fallen apart so badly that there was no hope of reconciliation. Oh, I'm just so sorry about whatever has happened. I don't know why I'm saying it here either, but I feel like I have to put it out there in the universe so that somehow Sasha can feel it. I'm truly sorry. Put it out there in the universe so that somehow Sasha can feel it. I'm truly sorry. Update 2: I finally visited Sasha today. She was in really bad shape, and it showed on her face. She's been in rehab for a few weeks now. She's slowly recovering, but she wasn't in any state to meet people, least of all me these days. She'd finally agreed to see me, and it was really weird and horrible for me to see her because she looked bad. Not ugly, but bad in a way that makes you feel like this person has been through something. It was very awkward for me to walk into that room and speak to her initially, since we barely ever treated each other like family once we reached adulthood. But now we had to put all that behind us, or at least try so that we don't keep trying to one-up each other and drive one another crazy in the process. So I apologized to her for whatever I had done and admitted that it was just insane. I hated her so much that I literally pulled some soap opera level stunt just to put her down and gaslight her, which was pretty psychotic of me. She agreed and then apologized to me for trying to get with Ben as well. She told me that she'd always been jealous of me right from when we were kids because once I was born she felt like I would become her competition. It was all internalized, but it still manifested in her behavior. She just couldn't control it, so she felt the need to put me down and compete with me so that she could win. When Ben agreed to marry her, she finally thought that she'd won. But that wasn't the case. She said that she was finally done competing. And even though this didn't mean that we were friends all of a sudden, but it was certainly a fresh start, to say the least. So that's what happened. And I truly am grateful that I got a second chance. I would have hated myself forever if something awful has happened to Sasha, and would have forever blamed myself. I feel considerably better now. Update 3. Hi, I just wanted to tell you guys that Marcus and I are still together. Obviously, that goes without saying. I don't know who suggested that Marcus and I had split just because I hadn't mentioned him in my updates. He knows and is well aware of everything that's happened to Sasha, and he also apologized to her. She wasn't eager to meet him, but she admitted she'd moved past it and understood that Marcus was only trying to be a loyal and protective husband. She decided not to hold it against him anymore. That settled things. Marcus was obviously carrying a lot of guilt too and seemed just as sorry, if not more, than I was. I have no idea why people were bashing him for being complicit and not doing anything to fix things, even though I hadn't even mentioned whether he had apologized or not. So I hope this clears that up and people stop calling us horrible names. We've apologized and Sasha forgives us. End of story. And for the people who are blaming my parents and saying that they are responsible for the situation, I don't know why you think that's the case. My parents could have dealt with this better for sure, but I think they were trying their best to handle everything with sensitivity and kindness. Them hiding my sister's alcoholism from me was probably in both our best interests. I hated her and she hated me, so why would it even matter what the other was going through? Obviously, they didn't know what was going to happen in the future, so I'm not going to blame them for hiding this piece of information from me. They did what they felt was right, and honestly, I think it's fine. There's a lot of you guys who still think that my sister is the villain somehow, and okay, maybe she is, but so was I. What I did was really messed up. So if I get a second chance to fix our relationship and have a normal family for once, then I'll take that without question, even if it means forgiving my sister. Thank you. Update 4. Hi everyone. It's been a whole year since I posted Lost and it feels strange, but I believe I'm prepared to tell you what's occurred since then. Many of you cautioned me that my sister might betray me again, or worse. Many of you suggested I should distance myself from my parents, and a lot of you thought that I was the only toxic element here and that they'd all be better off without me. I'm thankful that none of those things are true and we're all happy with our respective lives right now. My sister and I made a genuine effort after that to reconnect and build a relationship with each other because both of us were pretty tired of fighting with one another. It just wasn't worth it anymore, especially in our 31. We had 100 things to worry about anyway. We just didn't want to spend more of our precious time and energy on something as petty as our rivalry anymore. So we would meet for coffee every once in a while. Not too often, but at least once in 3 months. We were also actually nice to each other at one of our cousins' weddings, and that was quite the shock for the rest of our family. Aren't the best of friends at all, but we're trying to be friends. We're okay with each other now, and that's what matters. I don't think we'll ever get to a point where we're very close, but we're not going to actively try and hurt each other. Now that's for sure. She's also moving a little further away from home for a better job. And though it might seem a bit uncertain, considering her struggle with alcohol, my parents are taking care of that aspect. If they ever need support, Marcus and I will be there for her. It's starting to feel like we have a somewhat typical family, and I'm genuinely thrilled about it. I never imagined that Sasha and I would have any kind of relationship, let alone a positive one. But who knows? Maybe even that's going to happen someday. So I'm glad that I didn't give up hope. And speaking of family, there's soon going to be an addition to mine. Marcus and I discovered that we were pregnant just a few weeks ago, and everyone is thrilled. I'm a month in already, and we announced it to our close friends and family on FaceTime a few days back. I FaceTimed my parents and sister in a group, and when I told them the news, they seemed really thrilled. Yeah, Sasha seemed genuinely happy when I told her, and even sent me a bouquet of yellow roses to congratulate me the next day. So life's been pretty great, and I guess that's how it is when you're not constantly filled with hatred and anger. I'm looking forward to pregnancy and motherhood, and I hope for the best.